Call meeting to order. Start with roll call.
Mr. Gherkin,
Present.
Ms. Lapp,
Here.
Mrs. McLean,
Present.
Mr. Schneider,
Here.
Mr. Sharp,
Here.
Dr. Smits,
Present.
Mrs. Weingarten.
Present.
Okay, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before you have the previous meeting minutes. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll move we approve. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Gherkin,
Aye.
Ms. Lapp,
Aye.
Mrs. McLean,
Aye.
Mr. Schneider,
Aye.
Mr. Sharp,
Aye.
Dr. Smits,
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten.
Oh, I abstain. I was absent.
Okay, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda and agenda changes.
There are no changes.
So there are no changes.
I will approve, or move to approve. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Mr. Gherkin,
Aye.
Ms. Lapp,
Aye.
Mrs. McLean,
Aye.
Mr. Schneider,
Aye.
Mr. Sharp,
Aye.
Dr. Smits,
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten.
Aye.
Motion passes. That brings us to our special presentations section of the meeting. The first would be presentation on the Fort Warren High School graduation requirements, the administration. Is that the administration that is?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Just
Mr.
let me
Buelis, are you presenting on that?
Let me just take
Or
a
Mr.
few seconds here. I'm going to certainly turn the time over to the administration, and then we have a group here that'd like to have a few words with the board too, and that's fine. My recommendation will be, though, however, after you hear from the people that would like to speak, my recommendation is we need to have a little bit more communication and work out a few other details. So my recommendation, it's just listed not as a first reading, which I was explaining to the group, but I would just, my recommendation is that we table that first reading also. But I certainly turn the time over to Mr. Buelis now.
So in regards to the actual graduation pathways, that this was started last semester, which Mr. Anderson was deeply involved with Mr. Anderson, that I don't know the depth of all of this to the knowledge that he does. So in regards to all the different pathways, I'm going to have him speak to that.
So I believe in your packet you should have this kind of Excel spreadsheet, and it basically breaks up into 3 different tracks for students to possibly go down. Currently we have the one, is it not there?
Yeah, we have it. Yeah.
Okay.
I put it in there. Yeah, it should be in there.
Okay, so currently we have the 48 credits, the one track. All students come in, 220 freshmen, they are placed on that 48 credits to graduate. What we've looked at back in October, a group of teachers, administrators, and counselors went to a training talking about the graduation guidelines, all the different changes. South Park High School presented, and they have 3 different tracks, and they talked about how some of the different benefits and different successes that they've had in implementing the 3 different tracks. So what it would look like for a student or a parent that is having a student enroll that is going to be a current 8th grader, possibly upcoming 9th grader. So the freshman would be presented with 2 different tracks. So you have your honors and your regular. So your freshman year, you would either figure out, if I want to do the honors track, I would be taking honors English, your math, and then some kind of honors science. And then you would be planning in your 4-year plan to include your foreign language and then at least 10 elective credits. Then, if you do not decide to do the honors track, you felt like, you know what, that's too much, I just want to go to high school and do the regular, then you would be taking on the regular diploma. So your freshman and sophomore year, you would be looking at these 2 options. Your junior year, if you figure out, you know what, college isn't for me, maybe not necessarily community college, I need to start thinking of another option. We would look at the technical track. So your junior year, you would start looking at other options. Currently, we have options, whether that be Fort Morgan High School, Lincoln, iConnect, some of those options. This is simply another option. So then they would enroll in the technical pathway, and they would start doing some work apprenticeships, some job shadowing with different manufacturing companies and skilled laborers around town. They could also be looking at MCC into the welding program, the electrician program, and all the different options they have. So we would need a partner with community members to really set this up so that they have some work experience and some skills they can learn during the school day that would translate into the workforce later on after high school. Because right now, the feedback we've received from community members is we want people that show up on time, stay off their phones, and work. And we feel that, if they were able to go down the technical pathway, they could learn a lot of those skills on the job site. The one difference is that they would have is the financial literacy requirement. So that would mean they would take a class that talks to them about managing money, your banking, home owning versus renting, and different aspects to try to educate them as well. That would be open to both it would be open to all students, but it would be a requirement only for the technical pathway. So a lot of the electives, you see there's a high number of electives on the technical pathway. That is the work experience. That is the job shadowing. Your junior and senior year, you would be doing on-the-job site training. It wouldn't be 25 credits of being a teacher's assistant. They would be actually working on the career that they aspire to be. There are a lot of questions. There are a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of wonder about this technical pathway. I don't know all the answers. I don't know everything. I can't predict the future, but I just think it is a good option for our students. It's not going to be for all students. A student can't walk in the doors their freshman year and say, you know what, I don't like English. I'm not going to do honors or regular. I'm just going to jump straight to technical. Technical pathway will be several meetings. It will be a team of teachers, admin, counselors, parents. Everyone's going to be involved in making this decision. We're not just going to simply dump a kid off just to dump him off. We're not trying to degrade his education. We're just trying to give him another option to get him to graduate high school. So are there any questions? They would also still be required under the Colorado graduation that they would still have to meet the capstone requirements or any of the AccuPlacer, ACT scores, ASVAB, any of those things that graduation requirements would still be in place. So even depending on whatever diploma or track they chose, they would still have to meet one of those standards, which is just like the freshman class currently.
So with our current graduation pathway, how many English credits and math credits are they required to have?
So they're currently required 8 English, and then math credits are either 4 or 6, depending on the number of science credits that they have.
Right.
So if they have 4 math, they need 6 science. If they have 6 math, they need 4 science.
And so the kids that may be directed towards the technical aren't necessarily looking to go to college at the time they graduate from high school. But what about down the road then? I should know this because I have kids in college now. What are the colleges requiring as far as years of English or credits of English?
I think there's always that what if. Students graduate all the time and think they're going to go out in the workforce, make a lot of money, and then they have to go back. And a lot of that would fall into the remediation or whatever the college entrance is required. And that would be kind of depending, unique on each college. I don't know. Maybe
I
Mr.
should know this.
Schneider. Maybe Mr. Schneider can answer better than that, but it wouldn't.
Being a graduate student again, it really does depend on the school you're going to and the program you're headed into. With me, it's a paleontology emphasis for going back. And again, it depends on where you're going. UNC is going to have different requirements in CSU than Mines and all the rest of them. It's scattered.
I was just worried that it would be that much harder for those kids to decide later that they're wanting to.
Yes, that is one of the concerns.
You said that there was a a meeting that you went to and there was another school district that had rolled out something
Yes.
like this? So have they actually done this, or this kind of just a template, or they've actually done this and had some experience with it? I just wonder what.
You know, my it's the South Park High School, and my understanding is they actually have been in the trenches trying the technical pathway. We definitely need to reach out to the counselor who's kind of put that together for them to see what kind of success they've had now that they've implemented the lessons they've learned. That was in October, so I'm guessing they'd have some good data for us by now.
I just would be interested to hear what, but I mean, I know it's pretty new, but I guess I like the idea that there's at least another pathway.
And I think
Because,
that's.
I mean, because some kids are, I mean, you want everyone to graduate. As an employer, having a high school diploma is huge. And so I think that at least this gives another option, because, I mean, some kids just aren't cut out for a regular pathway.
I think one of the biggest things to really focus on is that your freshman, sophomore year, you're going to be focused on the regular and honors. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be presented as these are the two tracks. And then your junior year, you're struggling, you're wondering, trying to figure out what do I want to do. College isn't for me. I don't know what I want to do. All right, well, let's talk about this option. It's the same conversation we have when we sit down with a kid that is interested in going to iConnect or Lincoln or any other alternatives education from Fort Morgan High School. It is simply just an option. It just gives us that much more flexibility to individualize the education.
So it's probably too early for them to have a sense for what percentage of their students are going into the technical.
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, South Park High School? Yeah, we'd have to reach out to them and ask. We actually do get our own matriculation rate on our school performance framework, so I can tell you the percentage of Fort Morgan High School students who go on to a 2-year, 4-year, or a technical pathway, but that's just the percentage of schools that are reporting back to us, and so I'm happy to get you those percentages for sure to start with.
I would like to see those.
So I guess I know I bring this up every time when we look at the graduation pathways and all, but I still look at that 3 PE credits, and I mean, have we ever looked at that, or we just keep carrying it through because that's what we've always done? Have we talked about it? Sometimes it just, I mean, so many of our students play sports, and I know they can get 1 credit for 3, but sometimes it feels like PE, we have almost as many PE credits there as than English or.
That is definitely a good point. I don't know the answer to why
I just didn't know if it was
PE's
part of the
been,
conversation ever.
not to my knowledge. PE was it was 3 currently, and we tried to keep it as similar as possible. Any other questions?
Thanks for all the time you
Thank
spent
you.
on it.
I know it's with you.
Thank y'all.
I know you mentioned there's comments on it. Will we wait till the comment section, or
I think it's up, you're chairman of the board, whatever you'd like to
it'd
do.
probably be more appropriate to wait to the comment section, so you could go ahead and have
So
our,
we'll continue to have an audience.
go ahead and have you guys come back up and talk about the drug testing policy, your status, and, sorry. Let you sit down and take a quick break, and then we'll have a public comment.
All right, well, just to revisit back on the random drug testing and moving forward with that in August, that we took it back with all the group to go through the handbook and found out that there were a lot of errors, a lot of things that probably should have been changed years ago, just in the regular handbook. So the actual handbook itself has been updated. We have merged, actually added in an activities policy that we haven't had, and essentially those will be as congruent as possible with the addition of having activities and athletics both in the pool to be to be in the random drug testing. So I don't really have a whole lot of other additions on what is in here, other than that there's been a lot of good work done to the handbook. And I don't know, you didn't?
They do not have that yet.
Okay. All right, well, I will send that to Karen so you guys can have a look at it, but I guess what questions do you have in regards to this?
Will that take effect then this coming school year, is what we're hoping?
Yeah, yep.
Were there any major changes from the last time we saw the handbook, or is it pretty much?
No, I wouldn't say, no, other than we've added a matrix, a discipline matrix, so it outlines specifically for activities, because they're all different, but the athletics piece, that one's pretty cut and dry, just with the percentages. So that one's a lot easier. And then you guys are aware that there is a $5 increase per student per activity that they're in to help offset the cost. So, questions? No? Well, I can tell you we do appreciate your support with this, and hopefully it will pay dividends and keep kids from having adult problems. So that's the hope. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and now that brings us to the public comment section of our meeting. Okay. Please state your name and what building you're at.
Brenda Anderson, I'm at the high school. And we're here, our English department being represented regarding the pathways. And my biggest concern is, I'm sure you guys know that Colorado State standards, there's 12 years of language arts standards. And when we put aside those 2 years of language arts standards, we're basically saying that those kids are not going to be getting those, and we're already struggling, I think, to make sure they have that basic core education. I don't think that we would say that we're against the technical pathway, but I'm not going to be able to support us going forward and not giving kids a basic core education for a lot of reasons. The first one is, I think that I'm not against the standards. I think the standards are a wonderful thing. I think kids should have we should have some way of measuring that every kid is getting the best education possible, and I don't know how we're setting aside 2 years of that in order to proceed with this pathway. I don't see how a kid who's going down a technical pathway doesn't need to be educated in those standards, that they don't need reading, writing, presentation skills, and those kinds of things. I don't see why they would need those any less than any other kid who might be getting more of that when they go to college. I actually think that there is a lawsuit out there right now with a kid who's a SPED student who the parents are suing and saying that he didn't get those standards met, and I think we're opening ourselves up to the fact that we're promising kids a basic core education, and that pathway they're not going to be getting it. The other reason, I guess my philosophy as a teacher has always been open every door to every kid. That when they walk in my classroom, I want to say to them, when you are getting your education, you can do whatever you want. You can go to college, you can choose a technical pathway, you can go to the military, and you're going to be prepared for whatever those are, but every time you make a choice that closes one of those doors, that's your future gets narrower, and I don't believe in that. And I teach at MCC in the summers, and I think I could speak to Todd and ask him this. A lot of my students that I've had out there are kids who change their mind later and want to come back. And they come in and they say things like, I need some help because I haven't had an English class in blank number of years, and I can't write a paper now because I didn't have what I needed at that point. They do change their mind. A lot of kids do. So maybe they think they know what they're going to do at 17. Do I want them so that they don't even have the basic requirements to enter a community college when they leave there? I don't think that this precludes them having a technical pathway. And the main reasons I don't think that it keeps them from having that is that our diploma is, in my opinion, pretty easy to get. We have a lot of seniors wandering around our hallways that have one class right now. And they have a lot of room in their schedule to go explore those things if that was available to them. We have seniors who are taking my English class and have a TA, and then they don't have much else. So somehow those 48 credits are being met. Why would we have to say you have to take less of that in order to explore those pathways? I don't see why we would set aside the standards to be able to do that. I'm not saying that they're low. I'm just saying I don't know why we would water down our diploma to get a better graduation rate. I don't feel like we are getting kids enough already when they're leaving. And you probably know I'm leaving. And I could walk away and say this doesn't matter to me, but I've invested 29 years in that school. I care that these kids have a basic education when they leave there. I don't think this doesn't work for me, in my opinion. I think if we asked our clients who are our parents if they want their kids to have less basic skills taught to them over those 4 years, I don't think many of them are going to say, please teach them less presentation, language arts skills, writing, reading. What I hear is from, because I've been there so long, I have kids come back who have been in my class and they'll say, I should have tried harder. I should have learned more. I should have paid more attention. Almost none of them will say I shouldn't have taken my last 2 years of English. I don't think I've had anybody who said I shouldn't have had as much as I did because I didn't need it. So I guess that's my reasons, but.
Hey, Brenda, I have a question for you. You mentioned a lawsuit. Could you?
I don't have the specifics of that. I just
Okay.
heard about that
I'd like to know
today.
more about that. 'Cause
Yeah,
That's
I'll-
pretty intriguing.
Okay, I will see if I can look that up and send the
Yeah, more
information
information.
specifics to you.
Therese Rich from the high school. And I actually have materials I can hand out to anybody who wants it because, hello, I'm a debate coach, and so that's the way my mind works. But I was just looking at information on the technical pathways type of situation and looking at CDE. And one of the things that CDE has right now is the post-secondary and workforce readiness guidelines. And it does concern me that if we don't have some form of an English those last couple of years, whether we change it to a technical English or business English, whatever we want to call it, that would cover things such as business correspondence, business ethics, those types of things, how to write a business letter or a business email as opposed to their personal ones. Because in the research I was looking at, there are companies out there saying kids are coming out, Gen Z, anyone born from mid-90s to now and coming out of high school and college, are coming in expecting to do their business correspondence in texties, text speak. And they're spending at least a year training their kids, these young people coming into the workforce, to meet the needs they have in the corporate world, whatever that corporate world might be. And so my concern is that we need to make sure that we're not cutting our kids short on some of those things that include communication on all levels, whether it's reading manuals, instructions, trade journals, whatever it might be, as well as the professional writing and that type of thing. And as I said, I've got research if you guys want to take a look at it. It's long, so it's the debate coach in me. But it's information that makes me a little bit nervous, because no matter what field our kids go into, they have to be able to communicate effectively. And they do have to be able to read those materials that are out there. And God bless the people who want the technical pathway. I think it's been missing in education for a very long time. And it's about time we're talking about it, but we also have to think about what the basic needs are, even in a technical pathway. Because we've got a lot of kids who have no intention of going to college, either 2-year or 4-year. But again, they might change their minds when they're 25. And do they have the basis to help with that? One other thing I wanted to mention on the PE thing, I don't have the specifics on it, but I believe that's still a holdover from as far back as the Kennedy administration about the physical education stuff that was required, and I don't think it's ever been taken out of federal law. Just a sideline that doesn't have anything to do with this, but that was an answer to that 3 credits. So I'm afraid that we're going to have some kids that aren't going to be prepared for that workforce, and then we'll be in violation of CDE in a different way, not just the standards, but that workforce readiness. And that's where some of my concern is.
So I have a question. I briefly read your email. Sorry, I didn't read it from.
I don't know whose it was.
I briefly read it before I got here. I didn't see the whole thing. I tried to look through it. It's your proposal, my understanding is that you would add 2 other English classes, so they'd still get the credits, but this may be a technical
I did
English
some
or-
research on other schools that have done technical pathways, and I have not looked at South Park, but I just started looking into what other schools are doing, and I didn't find any that were saying don't have English for the last 2 years, but instead they had different options in a menu for their senior year, not their junior year, that would include things like what's called technical English.
Okay.
You know, so that still met the standards, but it still had a focus that was geared more toward what they were doing as they were exploring their, whatever path they were taking. So there was technical English, and we were looking at, we have Global Connections that also has been geared toward those kids who want to go military or want to go to a technical school or whatever. We've already created that course in the English department for those students if they can't take comp and don't want to take AP that are honor students. So we're already kind of trying to address that, but I think what other schools are doing, in my opinion, is that they're not taking out the English requirement. They are just having a menu item for the kids that would meet those needs. So.
One of the purposes tonight, we knew that this was going to be a first read-through, but we just wanted to present information that we think you need to think about as you're looking at changing graduation requirements or guidelines. It's just planting some other information out there, even though we know it was supposed to only be a first read-through and nothing was going to be finalized. There are just some concerns that we think need to be involved in the discussion.
I'm Judy Caruth, and I'm also a high school English teacher. The question that I have, aside from my colleagues, is how will the students be protected in these apprenticeships, working with skilled laborers in the community? Will those people be screened somehow? Will there be some oversight as far as what happens with the students when they're out in the community? And then also I wondered what protections would be in place for those businesses that would decide to take on apprenticeships. Sometimes students make mistakes and sometimes they're costly. How would that all play out? So those are not really English concerns, but they're more concerns about the students and their safety and their welfare. Thank you.
Comments? Thank you.
Samantha Wilkinson, former high school English teacher as well. I only have two other comments, and to echo everything that my colleagues have said. This is not merely an English department concern. I've talked to many people in other departments, and they all are echoing the exact same things of, are we watering down our diploma, and what exactly does that mean? But then just another thing to consider, one of the departments we're trying to build a lot in our school is the ESL department, the ELD department. And when your student comes in as a freshman, if they were to take ELD 1 and ELD 2, they would get 4 credits of English. And if they were to be put in the technical pathway, they could actually exit high school without ever having to take an actual mainstream English class with an actual English educator working on those standards, which I think many people would agree that that is an issue that would need to be addressed. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for your.
Eldwin H. Brito from the high school. This is a big undertaking. I did 10 years in Denver Public Schools. There was a lot of shifting, there was a lot of movement, there was a lot of different programs and ideas, and I always kept hearing the horror stories from the 1970s where they actually tried the track system. In a diverse community, we have very affluent people and then people at the bottom and everything in between. The bottom line is it ended in disaster. A lot of the kids at the bottom were getting the technical, they were pushed out. The parents complained and were saying, how come my kid is not going to college like the white kid? So I think this needs to be opened up and researched a lot more, open it to the community, because this is going to affect a lot of people down the road. So that's what I want you guys to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I didn't see the email. Brenda, you sent that today?
There was a.
Yeah. I think I got everybody.
Mr. Bielis, will there be, and Mr. Anderson, will there be opportunities for the public to see this before it's finalized? Or, while it's still being envisioned, so they can have some input?
Can you say that again?
Will there be an opportunity for parents to see this and have some input before it's?
Yeah, I talked with Mr. Eccles, and I've spoken with him as well and others, and again, I don't know all the timelines and everything, but is what I do know is that we want to be as transparent as we possibly can be. We want to do our research. We do want to allow parents to know what's going on. And I would like to know more research, and I would like to, let's do call South Park and do those things. And so, yes, parents will know, and we will have some type of an open forum or something. I think would probably be the best way to go.
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay?
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for all your comments. Are there any more audience comments? Okay, moving on to the report section. Our former high school student representative is absent today. So we'll move on to board reports. Any board reports?
I went to the Fort Morgan Head Start meeting as a board representative, and they just had a site visit from their state person, and they're doing really well. I think we'll just continue on. I think they came through. I mean, he had a couple of suggestions and stuff, but nothing that was really out of bounds or anything. Marcia's got a strong program.
Any other? Thank you. Trish, any more board reports? Okay, moving on to the superintendent.
I'll have comments later on this evening in other areas. Thank you.
Our HR director, Mr. Boyer.
Hi, good evening, everybody. We've been busier than the United States Postal Service. We've received 11 letters. Yeah, that too. 11 letters of resignation since we last met. They're listed on the personnel action report. Our once very small vacancies and hires report is growing as we speak. So we'll have 6 retirements. Ms. Anderson mentioned earlier that she's one of those. These are folks that have been on a supplemental contract. They will leave us May 24th or 25th, depending on what school they're at. So those 6 will exit. We have 11 that have resigned their positions. We have 4 retirements pending, with one of those being a supplemental to return next year. And then we're ending 8 long-term sub positions, positions that we've had to fill in the interim from different vacancies that have been created throughout the school year. So we're definitely in our busy season. We've now attended 4 job fairs, one in Chadron, one in University of Wyoming, and then the CASE job fairs in Colorado Springs and Denver. And then this week we go to UNC for 2 days, and then the following week, actually 2 weeks beyond that, we're going to CSU. Out of all those, so far we've had 1 hire. So we're not doing so great with all the letters coming in, but we'll continue to try, and if anyone knows of any good candidates, please send them our way. We are getting lots of interest on the new website. We have 91 applicants sitting out there right now, and so there is some hope that there will be some hires out of those 91 applicants. Any questions that I can answer? I also wanted to talk about how we're doing with the superintendent search. That process ended March 21st. We had a total of 29 applicants that applied. The consultants working for us are working really hard on doing backgrounds, and they are also doing video interviews. They'll be here on April 11th in our executive session, presenting those candidates to you all for your selection of 4 finalists. Between now and then, I'll be sending the board some interview questions, potential questions for you all to pick from. Then we also have lists of interested parties that would like to participate on the interview committees, and those are forthcoming. So I'll get those out tomorrow. And if you can just think those things through before we meet on the 11th, that will help that meeting go all the much quicker. And then on the at the week of April 16th, we'll have our candidate interviews, and those will be scheduled the night of April 11th. They'll actually make phone calls to those candidates you've chosen and make sure they're good to go.
Michael, I have a logistical question.
Yes.
So that week of the 16th, are there chunks of time that we're setting aside or something? Just trying to know, because with scheduling for my other life, I'm trying to figure out what portions I can schedule and what not, because I do have things on the calendar. Do we have some idea?
I don't, but let me make a phone call and an email first thing in the morning. I'll see if we can't narrow that down so that you can plan your other life.
Okay.
We thought it was just all about us, but apparently I'm wrong. So
Sometimes it is.
so I'll get you those answers
Thank you.
because I don't know it at
Okay,
this moment in time.
Well, thank you. Looks like you've got a lot of work ahead of you.
Yeah.
Yep. Mr. Lee?
If you want to open up your financials. Page 1. General fund financial through January 31st. If you look at column 2, second column from the left, excuse me, about 6 lines down, total revenue $12,000,006. Jump down expenditures, about 6-7 lines further down, expenditures $13,000,009. So we are deficit through January of about $1,000,002. And if you look at the total expenditures section there, we had $8,971,520 of salary. They see that number?
Mm-hmm.
And if we look back a year ago, that was $8,003,000 through January of 17, so we're up about $652,000 in compensation. Nothing unusual about that. It was what we had proposed in our budget document. If you look at total expense, second column from the left, the middle page there, $13,971,470. That's our total expenditures through January 31st of 18. Compared to a year ago, that was about 13,1, so we're up 827,000 expenditures through the first 7 months of the year. And if you look at that far right-hand column, you can see our budgetary expenditures as a percent of our just 7/12, which is the 58.33%, which is the very top number in that far right-hand column, just below the heading. So if we look at salaries, we're at 56.76%. If everything being equal, then we had full employment, we'd be at 58.33. So we're down about 1.57% in total expenditures. On our budget of almost 16 million of expenditures of salaries, that's about 250,000. So we're running ahead about 250,000 from what we anticipated in our budget adoption. The budget number for next month will update from, because we adopted that revised budget the last day of January, so next month you'll see an update in that budget column for February when the board approved that. So we're still tracking on pace with what our anticipated budget is. We are seeing some savings in salaries, which we discuss every month. Last year, our budget savings in salary was 1.8% under budget, and this month it's 1.5 year to date. So we're a little bit reduction there, but still we're a plus in total dollars, and of course we're still on track to have a deficit for the year, but nothing unusual. That was what we had anticipated in our total budget adoption. And we did see a tick up in our budget revenues, and when we did our final budget in January, which I'll kind of review that when we do our February statement, just because we got some of that additional revenue allocation from pupil count and state assessed valuation. So we'll see a kind of an update on that next month. Okay. Questions or?
Well, thank you,
That's
Mike.
all I have.
Thank you.
Dr. Frasco.
I just have a really quick update about the Take Note initiative. We submitted a request for $40,000 It just was submitted last Thursday. We should know fairly quickly. Again, there was just some parameters on giving equal access to kids for music, and so most of the $40,000 is to replace instruments, but it's also, these two gentlemen here, these music teachers at the high school are proposing to do some after-school enrichment, so we can tag into the modern rock band class that started at the middle school that we don't offer currently at the high school. And then the music teacher from the middle school will also be doing a summer program, a 2-week summer program, as well as some after-school enrichment next year. And then the other pocket of money is for musical artists to come in from the outside. So pretty excited. Hopefully we get all $40,000.
Great.
Questions?
Thank you. Moving on to discussion items, policy first reading. We have IKF graduation requirements and IKF 2 graduation requirements. And I know there's a lot of concern about this, and we don't have to adopt it on the third reading. I mean, we can just keep going through readings until there's a firm comfort level in the community. Policy reading, second reading, several policies in there. We'll go through all those, but those are all second readings. Have there been any changes to any of those?
There is no.
Okay. So moving on to the consent agenda, we have the personnel action report, the list of checks.
Move to approve the consent agenda as stated.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll proceed roll call.
Who seconded that? Thank you. Mr. Gerken?
Aye.
Ms. Lapp?
Aye.
Mrs. McLean?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mr. Sharp?
Aye.
Dr. Smits?
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to action items. Action item A, consideration to approve general contractor for the Head Start project.
Can I make a comment or two?
Yes, please.
Okay.
First, I'll move we approve.
Second.
Okay,
Never
now,
mind if you're going to approve it.
now we'll
Now you can.
go ahead and let you.
No, I
open it
just.
up for comment.
I'm making a few comments, and then I'd certainly invite Mike, Mr. Lee to any comments he'd like to make. You have the contract in front of you. We weren't very happy with the language and the format of the contract, and we've had multiple conversations with our Jeff Kirtley, our representative, or owner's rep, via Simpson, the general contractor. We weren't happy with what I felt that the clarity wasn't there for the board to really understand exactly what requirement or what commitment the board was making via those numbers on that contract. I appreciate Mr. Lee and Karen's efforts in putting together. They received that, right, Karen?
The copy of the draft
Okay.
contract, yes.
Well, and the numbers that Mike put together?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the efforts of the individuals in putting together a clearer, more defined visual review for the board, so you can have a little bit better understanding of really what it is that's entailed in the contract as far as the financial commitment that RE3 would be making for this project going ahead. Again, I'm not necessarily very happy with the verbiage and the clarity of or lack thereof the contract, but that being said, again, as usual, like most districts, we're in a very tight time restraint, already a month behind where we hoped it would be earlier. So I just want to make those comments and thank Mike and Karen for helping put some numbers together and make some clarity when we spoke with Jeff earlier today. Mr. Lee?
I think you have this sheet here. If you can open up that sheet. This is, everybody with me on that sheet? Okay. This is a recap of a revised budget, and maybe just some prelude comments to this. We received, which the board's fully aware of this, but we received the proposals for our general contractor component of the new facility. We had already selected the pre-engineered metal building, and we had already issued that contract, have those costs, and those are that's the very first line on this page. That's our component cost for that. There were some further adjustments for some structural additions that had to be made, so it was an additional $15,000. So right now we're at $160,000 on our actual purchase of the structure. The general contractor contract that you have in front of you is for the firm that will erect the steel building and then do the full finish out of all the interior work, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, exterior work, and the whole bit. Of course, it'll be just like our new middle school, a variety of subs will be underneath that. When we got the proposals back for the general contractor proposal, we had originally 5 contacts. 3 of them attended the walkthrough, and only 2 submitted proposals for the actual bidding of the general contract. And as you recall, we had 2 bids, one for $4.1 million and one for $2.9 million. So we had $1 million swing differential in those 2 contracts. So we did select the Sampson Construction out of Fort Collins. They're a regional firm, but they have a Fort Collins office. But that put us ballpark about $1 million over our budget number for the whole project. So our owner's rep and our design engineering firm, which is Wold, embarked on a process to meet with Sampson and look at some components of the process where some costs could possibly be identified that could reduce that $2.9 million and still get us to an affordable project, not only from the Head Start component of the grant, the $2.6 million, but then what RE3 is kicking in for the additional 2 classrooms that we're paying out of our savings account effectively. So unfortunately, that process, and that's kind of the dilemma that has kind of brought us here today, is that process was very lengthy, and we got a worksheet, and you don't have a copy of this, but this is just some chicken scratch. It's a worksheet that was put together by all 3 of those parties, Sampson, RLH, and Wold, with possible alternatives to save some money. The total of this was $260,000 of various options that could be utilized. Unfortunately, there was a lot of things that and I'm going to take issue with all 3 of our contractors in putting this together, because there were some things in here like not finish the 2 rooms. It was just some things that just were nonsensical, I guess, for our project. But we did dive into it in detail, and we found some things in here that we think we can possibly save some money on, and we've identified those. And from this document, we identified about $118,000 of costs that we think we can shave out of the construction project to help us reduce our overall costs. The Head Start grant's fixed, so it's the costs coming out of RE3's pocket. But then in the original bidding proposal, we had wanted 10 different alternate ads to be considered as part of the project, and both firms that submitted proposals on that fully complied with the bid document. They had prices for all those 10 alternates. So we went through those alternates, and even though we're selecting cost reductions here, we picked 3 alternates that we thought would be an important addition to make the facility just a quality addition to our existing structure at Sherman School and for the preschool Head Start program. That was an motorized operable wall that goes across the thank you very much, the multi-purpose room, so it can, mornings, kids are coming in, the partitions can be open, plenty of access to monitor the kids and coming and going, and then close that off for more controlled activities during the day. So that was a $30,000 ad, which we selected. There was a, if you can envision walking down the hallway where kindergartners and preschoolers would be, which would be about like right here, and I'm rubbing on the wall, and I'm kind of getting this going on. So most of our facilities have tile up here, which really enhances the cleaning capacity of a tile clean versus drywall and scuffs and marks. So we went ahead and selected that option. That was number 4. The pricing from firm number 1 was $23,000 to do that. The pricing from number 2, our selected contractor, was $1,500. We're in questioning of the $1,500 to put full tile 3 feet up. So we arbitrarily put in a $15,000 number in there just to hold the place for that, but we thought that would be worth the maintenance dollars and just the overall process. But that's an agenda item to come back and say, well, the $1,500, how is that pricing? And we'll be willing to take the $1,500, but we think there may be an issue with that $1,500 in the calculation. The last one was the solid surface in the labs. That's a composite material rather than a kind of a stainless steel. It's a resin-based composite material that makes for greater durability, greater cleaning. They don't tend to look as deteriorated. That was only $3,000. So we had $48,000 of alternate ads and $118,000 of cost reductions. And you see that in the middle section here on my worksheet, where we started with a $2.9 million bid. We've added the 48, subtracted the $118,000 of cost numbers. The contract proposal you have starts with the $2.9 million, and it's probably a debate whether should that contract be $2.9 million or should that be $2.9 million with alternates number 3A, 4, and 9 being added to the contract, and with the adjustment for those deducts that we're proposing to do. So we're not quite in consistency with our owner's rep and our legal team as far as should the contract be as we have defined it so far, or should we start from the original proposal and modify from there. We want to make sure that there's absolute clarity in this contract as we get rolling on this project, and so there's no ambiguity about what was an add, what was a subtract, and that pricing. So we're still working through that process, and we didn't unfortunately get the contract till this morning, so there wasn't a lot of time to kind of review that process. And we were under the impression that our owner's rep had been working with our legal counsel that we've retained for our contract negotiations. They've worked together on our prior projects, but unfortunately, legal team had not been involved in this, so we had the contract presented today, and it hasn't been reviewed by legal yet. So I've had a couple conversations with legal today discussing some of our issues, and one of our most paramount ones is this is a federal contract which is subject to the Davis-Bacon provisions of the federal grant award on Head Start, and we absolutely have to be crystal clear of all the requirements for that program, and that our contractor is totally on board with all of that, and also the pricing of the labor rates to make sure they're in compliance with the prevailing wage. Ron and I's discussion think that they probably more than likely are, but no one can tell me today that, yeah, that pricing of that $2.9 million is fully in compliance with the Davis-Bacon. And we want to know that if the wages they pay for their workers to do this is above the prevailing wage, because they had to pay that wage to get their workers, that's perfectly fine, because then we know we're squared away. But if those wages are below the prevailing wage rate, then they have to raise them to the prevailing wage rate to be in compliance with the Head Start component of that. But if there's an opportunity for cost savings where on our portion of the contract we don't have to pay the full prevailing wage, we want to know that. And we just don't know that as of today. So Ron and I's discussion, more than likely, we're thinking the prevailing wage rate is going to be met because they had to pay with the workers, with the shortage of workers in construction these days. they're probably over that, but we've absolutely got to know before we sign this contract that they're on board with that, so we don't come back and, oh gee, we didn't realize those wage rates were so high. Here is the price change to accommodate that. So there's kind of a variety of things. I think legal will probably have contracts reviewed tomorrow. They'll be inserting the components for the Davis-Bacon compliance. We'll have an opportunity. I've got a call scheduled with our RLH rep tomorrow afternoon, and we'll make sure that Sampson's on board with the prevailing wage rate, that they've actually seen that document. It's a published document. They have to make sure they're on board with that. So we just have some house cleaning things we need to make sure that we have in place before we go any farther on that final contract piece. The middle section of the document is our other costs. These are traditional kinds of things that you do see. We have a contingency number that's held back of the $209,000. Not a huge amount, but on a $3 million project, hopefully that'll be enough to cover any unexpecteds we might incur. So our all-in building cost is the $3,018,000. The soft costs, as we call them, would be the $555,000. So our total combined construction cost is $3.5 million, kind of in the middle of the page there. How are we going to pay for that? It's $2.6 million of the Head Start grant, which is a fixed number. And the cash contribution from RE3 would make up the difference, which is the $974. What we've had as a placeholder is roughly $600. That was kind of what we were originally looking at as our contributions. So we're at $974, and I've just made a notation of our insurance that we still have pending. We do have some of that money already collected, which I've earmarked in our insurance reserve fund. If you recall from our audit presentation where I've earmarked that, and we did have a couple costs for some of the repair items on the mold that we did have on some of those modulars as an interim step, and then we've carved off $30,000 of that to replace the modular with Sherman that was being, or excuse me, at Pioneer that was being used for some storage. So we've earmarked $30,000 of that to put back in a storage shed for them, to address their equipment and this idle desks and chairs and things of that at the school. So that'd leave a net resource of $313. We needed the $974, so that would put us at $661,000 of additional out-of-pocket costs for RE3 as the numbers are today. And that would include the 3 alternate ads that we just discussed. And then on the premise that the monies hold true to the worksheet that we've gone through, we've had communication with, we haven't, but through our owner's rep, that we accept these cost reductions and we want these alternate ads. So at some point, I think it's probably good for our design, our owner's rep, and our builder and RE3 to get in the same room and just make sure we're all on the same page with the process. And we're also working on, Superintendent Eccles had made this pretty clear about what our completion date needs to be. So we lost a month in this cost reduction process. We never envisioned it would take quite so long to do that. So we're going to have to make up some headway, and some of that headway could be weekend overtime, but that would not have been in that original $2.9 million proposal budget number. So we're going to have to see how that number shakes out, if they think that they would have to increase the pace of work to meet that, what we'd call middle August or something of that nature discussion. So I guess what I would propose to the board, as odd as this may seem, we have proposed independently bid documents. We're going to firm back up on some of these cost numbers, and pending legal's final review, which is just making sure we have all the components of the federal contract language to make sure we're right on track with our Head Start requirements, to make sure that we don't have any toe stubs with Head Start down the road on certain contract language, and make sure our contractor is on board with that. So we're asking that you would give us permission to move forward with approving this contract with these clarification of these modifications and the final legal review of what is our existing contract. We use the same firm on this contract language as we have on our other projects, so there's nothing new with that, but we're asking you to take a leap of faith and trust here, I guess, because our timeline is rapidly escaping. And an alternative would be a special board meeting in the morning to do that. But every time we delay, our contractor is not going forward. And I get that. They don't want to do anything until we're on board in a formal agreement. But every day we add is creating problem with the August period of having completion for school move-in. So I think we're reinvigorated to get on board and get people in gear and get their documents put together, get their cost numbers contained, get them quantified, and get them squared away.
Thank you, Mike.
So this is where you'd say, yes, I moved for that leap of faith.
I think we already made a motion on the floor. So I guess we're moving in second basing on these numbers here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the action, the motion was on the recommended action of consideration to approve Ron Eccles to sign the contract for general contractor for the Head Start addition to Sherman Early Childhood Center once the final review is completed by the attorney. So.
We trust this guy, he's leaving.
I guess we'll find out.
And obviously, if there's any major issues, we can always get back together and make an emergency meeting. But
Without a doubt, if there's material changes in any of the construction dollars, proposals, and/or language in the contract, we would not move forward without coming back to the board to do that. But there's a lot of housekeeping to do here, but we want to keep the pace moving ahead, and I think the management team can get this stuff resolved and clarified and get our contracted partners fully engaged on the board.
Are they kind of ready to break ground as soon as we have a contract in hand, or?
Well, I would like to say so, but we're in the queue at the state on permit review. And that's another snag process, because and we've done that some time ago.
And that's separate from the contract, it's not waiting for.
No, yeah, they're not waiting, they're just looking at the mechanics, and you're just in the queue with everybody else, and it's just first come, first serve, and so we're in the queue, and it actually made it to a reviewer's desk out of the queue, so we're actually ready to have eyeballs on our document, so we're hoping that that's forthcoming, and then we can be ready to get rolling.
Thank you.
Questions or clarifications on this, or anything I can?
Okay, any more questions? Then we'll proceed to roll call.
Mr. Gerken?
Aye.
Ms. Lapp?
Aye.
Mrs. McLean?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mr. Sharp?
Aye.
Dr. Smits?
Aye.
And Mrs. Weingarten?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Thanks for your vote of confidence. We'll get this building on track here, and we'll get moving.
Who's signing the contract?
Somebody by the name of Ron Eccles.
Oh, did I say Ron? I meant.
You haven't left yet.
You're still here.
He's still here. He's still the man.
Our next item, agenda item is consideration to approve a donation from the Optimist Club.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
No, just thanks to the optimists.
Yes, very generous donation. We'll proceed to roll call.
Mr. Gerken?
Aye.
Ms. Lapp?
Aye.
Mrs. McLean?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mr. Sharp?
Aye.
Dr. Smits?
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next item, agenda item is consideration to approve the Palmer High School Music Department trip to Canyon City.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Are you guys gonna go see the flaming dinosaur?
The what? I'm sorry.
What?
Flaming dinosaur down there.
Yeah,
Wild
can you
Horse?
tell me where that is? I'll write it down. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to get to them. Just a brief kind of idea of what this is. I think that this trip has been taken a lot in the past. I know they did it 2 years ago, and we both have students who've been raving about the trip and had a great experience. And I've seen lots of awards and stuff on the walls dating back to, I think, the 80s. So I know that it's been a long what's what I'm looking for? History of our grade school going there. So I'd like to continue that, and if you have any questions, we'll answer them, but otherwise.
No, I think it's great, now that we can't go to stay in the hotel in Glenwood anymore. All those of you remember that one. But
Nothing will happen like that, don't worry.
I think it was before your time, but my kids were there. But no, I think it's a great opportunity for our students, so.
Now, is this a marching competition?
There's a lot of different aspects involved. We have a more concert kind of part where we go and we actually play on a stage and we get some feedback from some judges, some experts with that ensemble, but there is also a marching part of that, and so we're not quite a serious marching band, but we will be marching in a parade on the last day, Saturday. So I think that'll be a great experience for the kids as well.
Well, I'm a little older than the 80s.
Yeah.
But there was a time when Fort Morgan won marching competitions in the state and hosted them here as well, field marching competitions. I hope that it will continue to grow and we can get back to that.
Sure, yeah.
Is this both orchestra and band?
And choir. And choir, yeah. So I know 2 years ago they took only band and orchestra. They did add a choir aspect to this festival just this year, and so that's a reason we were really excited to go as a whole music department and jump on that. So, yeah. Anything else?
How many kids are you expecting to actually travel?
130.
Wow.
A lot of chaperones.
Oh yeah, sending emails like crazy.
Looks like they did a remarkable job of fundraising too. It's a lot of money that they raised.
Yeah, our students have done fantastic with that.
I went to this event 45 years ago.
You said 45?
45.
What did you play?
Trumpets.
Really?
We had a full marching band, and we also have a stage band. That's what we called it back then, was stage band.
Yeah.
Which was the night before. It was a great time.
Great.
So I was
had a prison escape, and we were all lined up right outside. Dead serious, right out of
There
Kansas
is a
City, came
prison.
over the
Someone
wall.
told me I should see it.
Yeah.
Our last trip was 78, and we got halfway there and got snowed out and had to come back.
Oh.
We're anticipating about 14 parent chaperones, hopefully, is the number I'd like to get to. Then we're going to have Nick and myself and hopefully 2 other teachers from the school. And then we're going to have 4 bus drivers with us as well. So, yeah.
Hoping to make it a great experience for our students.
Yeah.
I think it's terrific, and I'm thrilled the excitement that you bring to the program, and yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks. Thanks for your support.
So, good luck.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any more
I can't believe I
comments?
said that, 45
I
years.
can't believe you said that out loud.
You said it. You said that.
My math brain isn't working, so you graduated in?
73.
Ooh, that's good.
You're
All
younger
right.
than my brother.
Most people are younger than me.
So are there any more comments?
I think we better stop.
Any more discussion? Let's have a roll call.
Mr. Gherkin.
Aye.
Ms. Lapp.
Aye.
Mrs. McLean.
Aye.
Mr. Schneider.
Aye.
Mr. Sharp.
Aye.
Dr. Smits.
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Guys, thank you. That concludes our action items. Next, you have before you information items, which doesn't appear to be any. Advanced planning, our next regular meeting is April 16th. CASB Days at the Capitol, March through April. The emergency exercise is April 3rd. Starting tomorrow.
Yeah, for anybody who,
National School Board Annual Conference is April 7th through 9th in San Antonio. We have a special meeting on April 11th to discuss superintendent interviews at 5:30. DAC meeting April 12th at 6:30. Superintendent candidate interviews week of April 16th. And the Crystal Apple Banquet on April 26th at 5:30. And that concludes for advanced planning. At this time, we need a motion to go into executive session.
Move to executive session.
And I need to have you read it just like it's on the,
Um,
and also invite,
And also, there's an invite list there.
Okay. Move for the determination of positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, development of strategic or strategy for negotiations, and instructions of the negotiators as per CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses E. And invite,
It's listed there.
No,
this one?
Yeah, it's there.
And invite Mr. Eccles, Mr. Lee, Mr. Boyer, Dr. Frasco to attend the executive session with the board.
and should we combine that? You want to also,
They actually have
Or
to
do
be
we
two
have to have
separate
separate?
motions
Okay.
because they're two separate topics.
so let's go ahead and have, is there any discussion on that one? Okay, let's have roll call on that.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Apologize.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Mr. Gerken?
Aye.
Ms. Lapp?
Aye.
Mrs. McLean?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mr. Sharp?
Aye.
Dr. Smits?
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Shoot.
And then go ahead and do the second motion now.
I move,
Go ahead.
I move we approve going into a second executive session following. First, regarding discussions regarding personnel matters as per CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses F, and Mr. Eccles and Mr. Boyer to be invited to attend.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Gerken?
Aye.
Ms. Lapp?
Aye.
Mrs. McLean?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mr. Sharp?
Aye.
Dr. Smits?
Aye.
Mrs. Weingarten?
Aye.
Motion passes. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll reconvene in the conference room.
Conference room A.